Yo, what's up fam? It's your boy NoisySauce here, back with another video. Today I'm going to be going through all the features of Chromaverb and explaining why it's my favourite stock reverb plugin for snare drums.
Throwing some sauce on that beat.
So I've made this pretty basic hip hop beat and this is what we're going to be working with. Sounds good, but that snare drum could use some reverb. I'm just going to bump up the reverb send to the channel and open up our Chromaverb plugin. Now I'm just going to go through all of the features of this plugin with you bit by bit. I'm just going to start by soloing the reverb channel so we can really hear what it's doing. The first up is we've got a whole bunch of different sounds or characters that this reverb has. So I'll just show you what all of those are. Pretty cool. There's a lot of stuff to work with, but for the purpose of this, I'm just going to be sticking to the room sound. So this first parameter here is the attack, and what that does is it increases the ramp up of the reverb. Next up, we've got the pre-delay, which just adds a delay to the start of the reverb. And you can hit this button here and it actually times it to the tempo of the song, so you can have it sit at pretty cool. Next up we got the size, and what that does is it spreads out the reflections to give the vibe of like a bigger sound. And there's also the density, which is how many reflections there are. At a higher level, this kind of smooths it all out and it sounds a bit nicer. And at a lower level, it sounds like a whole bunch of small reflections, a bit more grainy. Next up, we've got the decay, which is probably the most important parameter of any plugin, and that's how long it goes for. And this one ranges from 0.25 of a second all the way up to 100 seconds. Don't know why you would ever use anything up to 100 seconds, but it's possible, so there it is. I would normally never go anywhere over about 8 seconds, especially for drums. Probably keep it around the 0 to 3 seconds mark. There's also this button here called freeze, and what that does is it freezes the reverb wherever it's sitting at the time that you hit it. So and that'll just sit there forever. Again, I don't really know the feature for that. I think it's for making pads and stuff like that, but it's something that you can use. Again, you can also have this timed to the tempo of the song if you want. Next up, we've got the distance, and what this does is it changes the energy of the reflections to make it either sound like you're really close to the source or really far away. And we also have a mix section here, so you can mix in the dry snare drum and the level of the wet. This is more useful if you've got this sitting on a channel itself, but because we're using it as a send, we are just going to have 0 dry and 100% wet. Now up here we've got the EQ section, which not only acts as a really cool visual, but also an interesting EQ where instead of acting as a decibel changer, it changes the amount of decay for each given frequency. So if we flatten all this out as a starting point, we'll have a look, and you can see on the side here, the 0 line is actually the level of the decay that you've chosen here. And then for each frequency, you can either shorten or lengthen the decay, depending on if you're going up and down. And you can go up to twice as long and down to pretty much nothing. So this is really cool if you say wanted to just increase the high frequencies length. And you can hear the reverb starts off at that normal level, but then ends up at like a sizzly sound. Moreover, you could get rid of those high frequencies so that it starts off with a nice bright sound, but then doesn't have that sizzle last too long. And you've got 4 bands to work with there, so it's really powerful. I'm going to move on to the details section now, and it starts off with another EQ section, and this is just a standard EQ. You guys know how EQs work. So I'm going to move on down to the quality. Now, there's 3 different choices here. You've got low, high, and ultra. And the low has a kind of like a lo-fi grainy quality to it. High is your standard reverb, and ultra is like a really smooth hi-fi sound. So I'll just show you what that sounds like. There's not too much difference there. It's just a kind of graininess that you can hear. A lot of the time you'll be tempted to go for the ultra quality because high quality better, but it really depends on what kind of vibe you're going with the reverb. I actually prefer the low quality most of the time. The other thing the quality does is it can add noise to your modulation. So with the mod, you've got speed, depth, mod source, which can be changed between a sine wave, a random wave, and a noise wave, and smoothing at the end. This is pretty self-explanatory. It's kind of hard to hear on the reverb, but it does change the vibe of it more than you can actually hear the depth. And the random. What I can hear more than anything else is how it takes away some of the high frequencies there. With the smoothing, what that does is when it's on this random setting here, it smooths out the transition between the jumps, and when it's on either the sine wave or the noise one, it adds a bit of saturation. Next up, we've got the early-late balance, and this is just changing the difference between the early reflections and the late reflections. So with just early, it sounds like this. And the late ones. So you can really change the character of your reverb. Next up, we've got the width, and that makes it wider if you go up. or you can take it all the way down to mono. The final feature of this plugin is the mono maker, and this puts everything underneath this number here into mono. This is cool if your reverb has a lot of low frequencies, because when it goes into a subwoofer, the stereo nature of the reverb could cancel itself out and make a really muddy low end to your mix. So using a mono maker will mono out those low frequencies and just make them less muddy. I try to not have too much low frequencies in my reverb anyway, so that's not normally an issue, but it's a handy little tool there if you do have an issue with your low end getting muddied up because of it getting monoed. That is all of the features of this plugin. So I'm going to show you my favorite setting on snare drums for hip hop beats, and that is in the halls section and this vintage concert hall. I like to take that one, get rid of the pre-delay, get rid of the attack so that it's instant when it comes in. I like to drop the decay to about 1.1 second, but it will go up and down depending on the beat. And I like to pull this low pass filter down to about 2K. And that gets us a sound like this. I'll play it with the beat. Sounds good. This is without it. Oh, that's without the snare. This is without the reverb. And with. Thanks so much for watching, guys. I'll catch you next time.